I came in as a gender and a child rights expert, looking at the data that we found when we went around the whole of Zimbabwe looking for information with regards to access to treatment during the COVID period. I have a background in social work as well, and a background in child sensitive social policies. When that is your background, your emphasis is not on what adults are saying, but it's on what children are saying. So everybody is important, whether it's a man, whether it's a boy, because those boys are the ones who are impregnating them.
Welcome to another edition of Research and Innovation. My name is Stephen Ngomani. On this podcast, we get to sit with the doctors, with the researchers, where they have to come through and also give us on what they really focus on. Today, I've got Dr. Eve K. Chandaengerwa. She's a seasoned academic researcher, a childhood and child rights, gender and health system analyst with over 15 years of experience in teaching, research, and policy analysis across Zimbabwe and Southern Africa. And she's the one that I have right now. Let me say welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
Doctor, just to get into our today's conversation, can you tell us all about yourself? Tichitanga kutaura kuti mimi makatanga kutangira papi looking at your research background.
Okay, thank you. I would want to say maybe the first time I actually did any kind of research was when I was at the University of Zimbabwe, when I was doing my master's in sociology and anthropology, and I was supervised for a dissertation on indigenous knowledge systems by Professor Maposa. And that same professor, we were talking about the issues today about mentorship and being mentored and doing research. He supervised my research then, and he's still mentoring me even up to now. So yeah, a research journey starts sometimes at a very almost insignificant place. If you think maybe when you're just a student and you're just doing your dissertation and you are thinking this is just a dissertation, it has nothing to do with my career, but that's where my journey started.
So what made you choose to focus on childhood and child rights?
Okay, I got funding from the Ford Foundation when I got a scholarship to go and study at the University of Pretoria. So it was a D field. So for a D field, there is no taught part. You are supposed to just start doing research on a particular area of interest. So I chose to look at children in Zimbabwe, in rural Zimbabwe. I've always had an interest in rural children. So I was looking at rural children's experiences of growing up in Zimbabwe at a time when there was HIV and AIDS.
Okay. So can you tell us in detail, go us through your most recent studies, which I just have mentioned, that you are focusing on childhood and child rights, gender and health system. What major questions were you trying to answer, and what did you find out?
Okay, there are different researches which I've done. So starting with my PhD studies, it was based on children's experiences of growing up in Zimbabwe during the time of HIV and AIDS. So most of the research which still exists even up to now, it does not focus on the children themselves. It does not ask the children themselves, because people generally assume children know nothing, so they have nothing to say and they have nothing to contribute to policy. So because I'm a person who was trained in child sensitivity and child rights, my background also in medical anthropology got me interested in actually finding out how the children were trying to make sense of their lives during that time, what experiences they've gone through. So I was trying to capture their experiences from their own perspective and getting recommendations from them about what can be done to assist them. So that's one of the first major researches that I did, which led to other researches which I ended up doing with UNICEF. So there is another research which I did as part of a research team with the Africa University research team, which got an award, the Presidential Award for Research, under Dr. Chandaengerwa. She's the current Dean of Law at the department, but at the time she was the director of the Child Rights Center. So we were not only focusing on children, but we were looking at access to treatment during the COVID period. So we're looking at access to treatment for the whole of Zimbabwe. So we're looking at the health system, the Zimbabwean health system in its totality. But I came in as a gender and a child rights expert, looking at the data that we found when we went around the whole of Zimbabwe, looking for information with regards to access to treatment during the COVID period, and particularly looking at gender issues as to why, for example, men actually did not go and get the injection to deal with COVID. And those are the issues that we're looking at when we're looking at gender issues.
So looking at challenges and rewards you faced during your research journey, how do you stay hopeful while researching on something as critical as child rights?
Okay, the thing with when you're researching on child rights, as I said, I have a background in social work as well, and a background in child sensitive social policies. So when you're focusing on, when that is your background, your emphasis is not on what adults are saying, but it's on what children are saying. So that in itself gives me hope, because I'm interested in coming up with research based interventions which are based on what the children themselves are actually saying. That actually gives me the confidence that whatever findings we come up with, they're actually based on the real issues that the children are facing. For example, some of the issues that actually came out from my research, I was using what are called psycho theories and methods of collecting research or collecting data, where I was looking at children's dreams. So I would simply ask children, what is the repetitive dream that you've had maybe in the past year or 2 years? What dream or recurrent, have you had any recurrent dreams? And for a lot of the children, actually, they actually told me a lot of their dreams had to do with food. So I actually got to find out that one of the most pressing issues for them was actually access to food. A lot of them could actually not get enough food on a daily basis, on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of the children, I actually ended up finding out, they were staying in households with grandmothers. Some of them were staying on their own. And yet culturally, people would be saying these children are under the care of somebody called MSURADIO, who's supposed to be taking care of their issues. But these children in reality were actually on their own, because the MSURADIO would actually be in an urban area, and they would hardly visit because they are also facing financial challenges on their own, and they have their own children. So the realities were that culturally there are these expectations, and people would be saying these children are all right, they have people who are taking care of them, but the reality was that these children are taking care of themselves, which resulted in a publication which is called Fending for Themselves, which talks about how these children are forced to grow up very early, and they have to take care of each other and take care of themselves. And in some instances, they'll be staying even with grandmothers who are very old, sometimes too old to even hear a cell phone which is ringing whilst it's hanging on their necks. So if you expect such an old person to take care of a child when they can't hear a cell phone which is ringing on their own neck, really, that person is actually being looked after by the child. So you will find that the child would actually be looking after the grandparents, and instead of the grandparents looking after the children, because there are no alternatives for those children. And sometimes their parents would be late or deceased from HIV, or maybe they migrated to South Africa and then they don't return. So those children would then be abandoned, but without anybody really noticing that these children have been abandoned. So they would end up, for example, in Chiweshe, we found that the children were actually practicing dangerous activities such as mining, going in underground mining, without adults actually knowing that they would do that at night. Sometimes they would do it at night, and some children would actually die in the process, and they would not report. So a child would just go missing, and then the other children would actually not say that yesterday evening we went underground and this happened to so and so. So these children are actually growing up under very difficult conditions. So these are some of the issues that we did research. And there was last year, when I was also doing my postgraduate studies in social work, we did some research on teenage experiences of children who get pregnant whilst they are teenagers. So Mashonaland and Central had the highest statistics in 2023 and 2024 when it comes to issues of teenage pregnancies. So we were wondering what is going on there. So some of the stuff is yet to be published, but we discovered in Chiweshe it has a lot to do with the increase in the number of makorokoza. So it looks like a lot of the girls who got pregnant, they were actually getting pregnant from makorokoza, who would promise them luxuries and would even sometimes, for something as little as a packet of biscuits, would actually result in a child actually getting pregnant from someone who had just come into the area temporarily, because generally makorokoza are not men who are from the local area. They are men from outside who come into that area and they stay for a very short period of time. So it's got a lot to do with the same issues, to do with HIV, to do with absentee parents, to do with poverty. And these children, actually, the sad thing is whenever they would get money, they would not be doing it for fun. They would actually go and pay their fees. So it says a lot about the social protection systems in Zimbabwe that are available for children, and how we need to actually maybe even go back to traditional systems of childcare, where maybe people would come and do communal care, taking care of children as a community rather than leaving it to just individuals as parents.
In China, we say her presentation has got TV Why I'm saying that? Because she's really taking us through her journey, where she is researching about childhood and child rights, gender and health systems. My name is Stephen Ngomani, and this is the Research and Innovation podcast. And the one that I'm talking to is Dr. Eve Chandaengerwa. And Doctor, you mentioned names of doctors whom you work with and whom now also before, and stressing on the importance of research collaborations. How have you collaborated with other research institutes?
Okay, thank you. I've been privileged to have been part of research teams, as I mentioned earlier, under Dr. Tendai Nenga from Africa University. And under that, we were actually funded by UNICEF. And then I've also been part of a research team at the University of Zimbabwe, where we're doing research on poverty dynamics. There I was also a gender analyst. We're looking at poverty dynamics or poverty issues in Zimbabwe. It was also a countrywide study where we're looking at issues to do with poverty, the multidimensional states of poverty. When you're looking at poverty, it's not just economic poverty. Sometimes there's even political poverty. So we're looking at the different types of poverty. But we're starting with just ordinary types of poverty. We found very disturbing, if you like, issues to do with, for example, a child who grew up maybe in a place like Chitungwiza in St. Mary's, who actually told us that he's never seen water coming out of a tap from the time he was born. And people have to buy water on a daily basis. So obviously that affects the income of households. And that in some instances has resulted in those same children, maybe, especially where there are no adults, maybe where the parents are also deceased, you find those children now engaging maybe even in prostitution. So these are the things, these are the issues that are going on a daily basis. And they even explained the emergence of small packages of mini meals, small packages of vegetables, something called tsaona, and where people would buy maybe chicken intestines in a cup for a small amount of money, because then a child would engage in sexual transactions, and maybe they get $1, and that will just be enough to buy the cup of intestines for that particular day. So these children are living for the day. They don't even have the luxury of thinking about tomorrow or some other day. So people are on survival mode, if you like. So these children are growing up under quite difficult times, and this points to maybe the state and the government and policymakers to maybe put in place more interventions to come up with measures to actually ensure that children's lives are not destroyed, because as they engage in sexual activities with adults, nobody's checking what is happening to those children. And obviously the children cannot give consent when it comes to having sexual relations with adults. Even if they're having sex with children of their own age, the issues of consent are still very problematic. But these are the realities, because these children don't have any other options. Because normally a person who does not understand the inside stories of these people and these children who are in these circumstances, they start judging those people and say, why are they engaging in prostitution? And there are other options. These children don't want to go to school. They want to be just naughty, but it's not about being naughty. It's about understanding what options they have. And in some instances, they don't have an option for that very day. So they have to find a solution for that very day. So these are the issues that the research has been bringing up, and the need to have child-centered or interventions which deal with the specific issues that children are facing in specific places, because these all these issues are displayed differently in different places of Zimbabwe.
I really like the fact that you are talking about things that people out there, they really explain those things. And I really like the fact that you are really doing your research concerning children, where many people around the world, they don't focus on children. They just focus on issues like healthy, issues like gender. But I really like your research. Why? Because it is really talking about something which is happening, especially in Zimbabwe. And also I've got a question to you, Doc, that is your research mainly focused in Zimbabwe only, or to other African countries?
Okay, at the moment, most of the research that I've done has been in Zimbabwe. The little research that I've done outside Zimbabwe was actually when I was a research intern at the Center for the Study of AIDS. It's now called the Center for the Study of Gender, Sexuality and Health at the University of Pretoria. So yeah, there we were doing quite a number of researches when I was a research intern there, including research on male circumcision and trials on male circumcision and how it was playing out in countries such as South Africa, and issues to do with homosexuality and all those things that maybe here people don't really do that much research on, but it has a lot to do with the rights of people who are considered minorities of other countries, and how sometimes these people are left out of developmental issues. But at the end of the day, what I learned from the little research that I did in South Africa was that whenever one is doing research, the important part is to know that research informs development. So whenever we're doing research, nobody should be left behind. No part of the population should be left behind. No group of people, whether they are homosexual and you are not homosexual, should be left behind, because they are still part of the population. So the minute you leave any part of the population outside, it means that there is a significant part of the population which you are leaving. So even if it's, for example, the research that we did on COVID, access to treatment during COVID, one of the analysis that we ended up discovering, or we ended up concluding when we came up with some of the finding, was that if the interventions are not done properly, one will think maybe the rich people are well off and they are safe where they are. But the very same rich people get their employees from Bari, for example, where maybe there is not enough interventions to ensure that the population does not get COVID. So COVID will still end up going to Borodale if we don't make sure that every part of the system is catered for. So because every part of the system is still interconnected and interdependent, we are still in the same country. Everybody needs to be catered for and everybody needs to be researched on. So there's still a lot of research work to be done.
What an insightful presentation to you, Doctor. And I really now understand why is it you are really talking about specific issues where Zimbabwean children are encountering. But coming to you again with another question, what are the myths or misconceptions does your research help dispel, and how does it inform government and policymakers?
Okay. Most of the times when people are doing research, for example, in children, they don't look at how childhood is also gendered. They often assume if you're doing research on gender issues, it's about adults. They don't look at how experiences of children are should actually be disaggregated by gender. So experiences of boys and experiences of girls should not be lumped up as just children's experiences. So when one is doing research, one needs to separate the issues and actually look at how girls in a particular place are affected, how boys in a particular place are affected. So gender issues, a lot of the times, even for people who've done even university degrees on gender, sometimes they still forget that gender is not women. Gender is not adults. Gender is both men and women. So when one is doing research, one needs to, like I've said before, to make sure that every part of the population is really looked at, and we get to analyze what are the real issues with regards to all the parts of the population, because everybody has got a part to play in development. So when it comes to masculinities and manhood, they still need to be focused on. So if it's community development, for community development to be effective, you need to look at the men. You need to understand the men's issues. You need to understand the women's issues. And you need to split the women into the different categories of women. Whether it's elderly women, they have their own issues which come out if you do their research. If you look at middle-aged women, they have their own issues. If you look at young women, they have their own issues. If you look at young, maybe teenagers or adolescents, they have their own issues. But those people are all females. So when researchers are doing these researches, it's important that even as researchers, they disaggregate the data. They don't just lump everybody up and assume that once you found out this about a particular rural area in Midlands, the results are going to be the same as for results maybe you get in Mashonaland and Central. You might find the issues are very different. Maybe one of the areas is very dry, and maybe the issue there is water, and maybe in the other area there are floods. So the issues will actually differ. So even the interventions that need to be put in place by governments, by NGOs, they need to be based on research which has been done. So even NGOs and the government itself need to fund research, because research is important. Because if we keep doing interventions that are based on maybe research which was done in 1987, we will put interventions which are too old, which are not maybe dealing with issues that are current at the moment. So there's always need to do more and more research as new problems emerge.
As you can hear yourself, our listeners, that doctor today, she is loaded. She wants to keep on, giving us information. And but because of our time, doctor, what message would you like listeners to take away from you?
Okay. For me, the important part is whether you are a researcher, whether you are a policymaker, whether you work in government, whether you are at home and you think maybe you are not contributing anything to Zimbabwe, everybody is important. Every member of society is important. Because when I often ask my female students, sometimes, what do you do? They'll tell you, I do nothing, I stay at home. And then you ask them, what time do you wake up? I wake up at 4 a.m. I put water for the children to bath, and I make sure everybody is bathed. You are contributing to something. So everybody is important, and we should make sure that as a nation, we go back to our traditional values of Ubuntu, of helping each other, feeling for each other, kunzuirana. So some of that stuff is some of the recommendations which are actually coming out from the studies, especially from adults who are saying a lot of our problems in Zimbabwe at the moment is because we have abandoned our traditional values. So children are suffering because the traditional systems which were there, which used to take care of children, are collapsing, or they've already died. So we need to come up with new interventions, and maybe which are based on maybe suggestions which we are getting from the children themselves. How do we help girls who've gotten pregnant get back to school? How do we ensure that we include males in policy making? So everybody is important, whether it's a man, whether it's a boy, because those boys are the ones who are impregnating the girls as well. So everybody needs to be put on the bandwagon of development if we're going to have development in Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eva Chandaengerwa. This is a research and innovation podcast. So stay tuned for more. They're coming. And if you want to learn, please make sure that you don't miss any of these segments. My name is Ngomani, and I was talking to Dr. Eva Chandaengerwa. Doctor, thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you.